Okay, welcome. Medicine with the Metals. Today, Michelle's out for today. We've had some technical difficulties, but we have a really good guest. Really interested in this guest today. We talk a lot about psychedelics and plant medicine on this platform, but you know what? We really talk about healing. That's what it all comes down to is healing your mind, your body, your soul, so we can live life. We can live life to the fullest. So I want to go ahead today and I want to introduce Dr. Hector Rodriguez, and I'm going to have him just jump in and tell us a little bit about what he does. And good morning.
I'm Dr. Hector, and I'm an integrative psychiatrist. And what I mean by that is I have different tools in my toolbox for people, depending on where they're at in their healing journey. I like how you said, one of the main reasons why we're here is to talk about healing to get people from point A to point B. And when it comes to healing, I mean, that's a big word, but I do work a
Large.
lot with patients who've experienced trauma. That's kind of my meat of. But then when I talk about trauma with people, I try to explain to them is sometimes we think of trauma only as a rape or an assault,
Yeah.
like something like that, when we experience microtraumas sometimes on a daily basis. And when they start seeing trauma as stressors, then they start realizing, wait, so then I do have trauma. And I didn't know that's why I'm having these symptoms that I'm having today. So I try to connect the dots there and show how the brain works and how it behaves to these stressors. So the healing process is our goal, and I teach a lot of resilience, to be able to go through different stressors again and again and again and again and not get triggered. Right. So that's one of the biggest things that I try to work with my patients.
I, I really love how you say that in the beginning because this is what we preach. You know, People think of traumas as you were molested by your father, you were molested by your mother, you were raped, like you said. Traumas could be as simple as Billy the bully tripped me, and that was it. you know, I mean, it runs so deep, and you know, that's where it runs. These traumas, and to heal these traumas, I believe they are childhood wounds, and you really have to go and dig them deep. But I want to dive into a little bit about what you do. So you describe your work as like part science, part soul. So can you share what that means a little bit in our context?
Well, the word psychiatry is the medical treatment of the soul. And I learned about this when I went to the Louvre in Paris a few years back, and I saw a statue of Cupid kissing a girl. Well, that girl's name is Psyche, and that's where the word soul comes from. And then psychiatry, the medical treatment of the soul. So for me, that's the only way I can do psychiatry. A lot of people think psychiatrists are just people who are going to give you a pill, right? I try to go a lot deeper than that, which obviously takes us to the soul. And you mentioned wounds. A lot of the people that I work with have wounds in their soul. And my job is to try to get them to understand them, for them to see that that's there, and how that plays a role in how their interactions with people are today, how they're at work performing well or not performing well. So I try to combine those two because for me, the spiritual world is part of who we are as humans, right? That experience cannot be separated. So when I started working as a psychiatrist, I really just couldn't do it any other way. For me, targeting the soul of the individual is where I start my sessions. I get patients to explain to me who they are as a person and tell me what are the things that they have been through. And a lot of people think, well, let me tell you what I do, and this is what. And I'm like, no, it's not what you do. Is I want to understand who you are, and what are some things that have happened to you or not have happened to you that have taken you to who you are today. So I do dive pretty deep from the get-go. So when you ask me what do I do, that's the meat of what I do. I try to understand what's going on in someone's soul, and how I can try to get them to a place of healing.
I would say in the space we're in, most people don't really understand a soul until they meet their soul because the soul is there. And I like how you talk about spirituality because spirituality and religion are such two total polar opposites. It's unbelievable. So religion's a taught practice. Spirituality is where you find yourself and you find your soul. Our belief and some of who we believe is that we are God. And we are God not to the point to be m- me, God. We are God. We are the source. And the source is the soul. And not a lot of psychiatrists per se work the way you do. So it's more medication, find your soul, find your heart, block it all off. If you really truly want to heal, you have to go find those traumas.
Yeah, you do have to dive deep. Um, and that's why I was always called to do this. I have a master's in theology because at one point I thought that's what I was going to do. And now when I look back at it, I'm like, no, I was getting trained to be a psychiatrist, at least the type of psychiatrist that I want to be. And it's going deeper into people's understanding of their spiritual world and how that drives the decisions that we make, that drives the interactions, that drives the how we value certain relationships. I mean, I think it drives everything in our lives. When we're in medical school, we're taught biopsychosocial, but we add the spiritual. So I always look at biopsychosocial spiritual, because I can separate them.
Yeah. You say something really interesting. You said high performers who feel like they're sacred outcasts. Like, I understand that. Like, dude, I understand that to the heart. I get that. But explain what that means to you because that was me. I mean, I was that dude. I was him. So explain what that means to the audience.
Well, for me, an outcast is anyone that has been marginalized, that has been said, "We don't want you with us," right? So we're gonna get you out of this group. Um, I work with a lot of people that are like that. What happens to that outcast over time? They have to find value in who they are, and they usually dive into a profession. So the big bulk of the person that I work with these days is people that are high functioning, high performers, but they're still outcast. So I like working with that person. I radiate to that person. I mean, I feel I identify with that person big time, which is probably why I connect so well with them. We're not all the same. We are always looking, the outcast, the high performer outcast is always looking for something else. It tends to be more creative. We tend to solve problems not your typical way, if that makes any sense. And I think because we were outcasted, we were forced, and I see that as a good thing, but we were forced to look for other tools to survive. Because now that we've been outcasted, we don't have that support from the group, right? So, but I value that because that's what I teach my patients, especially my younger patients. I'm like, dude, like this is great that you have been outcasted because now you don't have to think like everyone else and you can find other solutions to the same problem.
That was a really great explanation you gave there, Dr. Hector. Really good. You know, because it's really hard to get out of that, or it's really hard to even recognize those parts of yourself until you get these deep dives. So let's explain a little bit these deep dives and how you get people there. I know how to get there with psychedelics and plant medicines, but how do you get there in the real world?
Is asking better questions. And it might sound, I don't know. Some people, well, yeah, that's kind of easy. I'm like, no, I think as mental health care workers, we need to ask better questions. I think doing what we do and the way we've been trained traditionally is we follow almost like a script. I've never been too much into following scripts. Even when I was a photographer, I would get the plan from the art director and I was like, can we tweak this a little bit? I always kind of went off track, which is why I always saw myself as a outsider, as a marginalized person, because I always thought differently. But I think that brought a lot of success in anything that I did. So everything that I learned while I was a photographer, when it comes to like just doing things a little different, I'm applying it as a psychiatrist. Yes, a lot of my colleagues might see me as like, well, why are you doing that? Why are you wasting time doing that? I'm like, because then I won't get to the meat. If someone is coming to me because they're having sleep issues, and I've had a lot of patients like that, and I'm never going to forget this gentleman, and we scanned him, his scan showed trauma patterns, a really bad trauma, something that he witnessed that was very stressful. And I asked him, are you sure you've never experienced something stressful like this? No, never, never, never. But I can't sleep, doc. I'm only here for you to help me with my sleep. So he was really avoiding to dive deep, which is something that I see a lot. That's a trauma block, right? I don't want to go there. I don't want to go down that dark alley. So don't even take me there, doctor, right? But I have to, because then how am I going to really help you if you don't let me? So I guide the person into like, first of all, let's soften it up a little bit. Like, we don't have to dive in right now, but there is something there. So then I recommended him to do some trauma work, EMDR, for example. I think he looked at me and was like, this guy's crazy. I lived a great childhood. Nothing ever happened to me. No, I'm not going to do that, right? He disappears. Don't hear from him. Probably like 8 or 9 months later, he shows up in the office. The guy was a whole different person, but he goes to me. He's like, doc, you were right. I did do the EMDR thing that you told me about. At first, I was like, I don't know about this. But I went ahead and do it anyways because I do follow the doctor's orders. I'm like, oh, thank God, someone. So he went and he did that. And he discovered that when he was about 6 years old, he was almost assaulted by a man in a bathroom. His dad came in, beat the crap out of this man. But the 6 or I think it was maybe 4 or 6 years old boy witnessed this happening. So over time, he stopped going to the bathroom at public places. Then it turned into not peeing in his home during the day. He only would pee at night. So what do you think is going to happen? Wouldn't sleep. When he discovered that, he was like, man, you were so right. I don't even remember that event. But in the EMDR session, we were able to dive in deeper. We did some hypnosis too, and we dove in, and that was a very vivid image that I saw. The guy is now sleeping, doesn't take any sleep medications. He had already taken like 6, and he was coming to look. I mean, I'm like, what else can I give you, man? There's like nothing else. Hit you in the back, in the head with a bat.
And they probably give them that poison of Ambien, right? Everybody's
right?
These doctors give that Ambien like candy right now,
Yeah. No, yeah. He was on Ambien and had been on Ambien for over 20 years. Now he came to me at the age of 66. He never made this connection because no one asked better questions. No one said, let's dive in deeper. Now, the scan did guide me into like, man, something did happen that you saw, something that you witnessed. His occipital lobe was on fire. So he went and he did it, He did what I have recommended him. And it's sometimes really difficult when people don't maybe trust the doctor because they think, well, this person is not either listening to me. That's a very common thing. I'm like, well, no, I'm listening, but I'm looking at the big picture. And I think there's a correlation here, right? And I was right. I'm not always right, but I was definitely right on this kind of, because trauma is one of the things that people don't think can get really imprinted in our subconscious. And then anytime you see something, feel something, smell something that looks like that other thing that happened, your brain and nervous system and immune system, everything just goes on overdrive. So it's asking better questions, honestly.
Yeah, your nervous system is really the complex foundation of how you're going to react to almost anything. So EMDR, can you explain to the audience a little bit what that is? Because I don't know.
Sure. I don't know. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a type of therapy. It's become very popular in the last decade, mainly because a lot of celebrities started being more verbal about the type of therapies that they're doing. I think it was Sandra Bullock that went on one of the podcasts and she said that EMDR changed her life. And now suddenly people are becoming more aware of it. But this is something that has been done for a long time. I have a really good team of EMDR therapists that are my go-to. Not everyone, and I always say this to make sure when we talk about EMDR, not everyone that is trained in EMDR should be applying EMDR. Because sometimes if you do it too soon, you might trigger the person. And then, which has happened to some of my patients, or when I tell them you got to do EMDR, they're like, hell no, that was the worst experience of my life. It was done probably wrong, right? So the person, the therapist has to be well versed in how your body is responding to any stressor. So I tell patients, when we're going down EMDR to do it, it's like walking down a dark alley of memories. Nobody likes to go down dark alleys. but you're going to go down this dark alley with someone who's going to guide you. That the minute they sense just sweating in your hands, vibrations because your body is shaking, just a vibration, they're going to stop and say, okay, let's return. Let's not go there. It's a type of exposure therapy. And if we know anything about exposure therapy, is slowly seeing something that was stressful to you. Like, I'm afraid of heights. I can do even like 3D exposure therapy, where you put on the goggles and you get closer to the edge and then you back out. EMDR is the same thing, but with your memories. So it's through bilateral stimulation. So sometimes they use little vibrations. Sometimes they have the eye moving back and forth. And then the reprocessing is the part where the gold is, right? We want to reprocess this memory that was giving you this reaction. So we're no longer having this reaction when we look at this memory. So in this guy's example, for example, was the memory of going to a public bathroom. Not even the actual assault itself, just stepping into a public bathroom. That was extreme stress for him. So we have to reprocess his nervous system through the desensitization of that event or that location. So it's a lot of visualization therapy, that's why when I see their occipital lobe and their scan lit up, I'm like, we got to do visualization type of therapies like EMDR, because we need to reprocess how your body is responding to this trauma or to this event or to this person that you saw. So in a nutshell, that's what EMDR does.
Yeah. So how many sessions would somebody have to go through to see some improvement with that?
It varies, but most commonly about 3 or 4 sessions. I've had many patients tell me on session 4, they're like, I just have this thing that just came off my shoulders. I don't have this and usually it's this tension. People with trauma they live with tension.
And it mostly lives. Can you explain this? You're a doctor. Most of this trauma lives in our gut region. Is that correct or wrong?
Gut and neck. Those are the biggest areas. That's why a lot of people, you might see something and you get a huge stomach pain or vomiting, nausea. It literally lives there.
Yeah, because our brain, our gut is another brain, correct? It is a huge chemistry of, like, people don't understand how important our gut is and the biochemicals in our gut and what it needs and how it processes. And, our gut is so important and we're not taught that. Our brain, for the most part, is trying to just be a matter of logic. And it holds a lot of things inside that are untruths, but it's really a protector of us. Then we have our brain and then we have our soul, and those two seem to really combat each other as we move on in life, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Most of the time, our soul wants to, and I tell patients, like, this might sound corny what I'm about to say, but our soul wants to roaming free. Doesn't want protection. Doesn't want, like the little gates. I have 7 dogs, so I sometimes put them in a little gate thing so they don't all run around. The soul doesn't like that, but the brain loves that. The brain loves repetition, make sure that I am safe constantly. And it's that tension that can cause a lot of issues in many people. But yeah, you're 100% right. I couldn't agree more.
It really, and I've never been a doctor, and, I've just learned a lot of these things through the use of some of these medicines that we work with. I mean, it's just so interesting how both of these are correlating a little bit about getting down to the same purpose. For us, psychedelics do it very quick, boom, boom, boom. You go through experience, you feel it. Some people say, wow, that was it. And then you find it and you work on it and you heal it. And that's the only way to do it. What really interests me is these brain scans. Are they so expensive? I mean, I think everybody should have a brain scan, just because you see what's going on. Are they expensive?
It takes away the guesswork. And I don't like to use that word too much, because I like to, I tell my patients, listen, your previous psychiatrist, they were trying to come up with a cocktail of medication that, first of all, there's over 300 psychiatric medications, and then there's the combinations. Every person is unique. So hold on, I don't think doctors are just throwing out there to see what sticks, even though people think that's what's happening. I'm like, no, we didn't go to many, many years of medical school, and psychiatry is one of the longest residencies just to see what sticks. No, that's not how we do it. But what the brain scan does, it shows us what parts of your brain are overworked. So we talked about psychedelics, right? We know that works a lot with the serotonin system, right? The thalamus, which controls a lot of our circadian rhythms, is driven by serotonin. Well, where is serotonin literally made? In our gut. So you mentioned gut earlier. When our gut is going crazy, it's because your brain wants that serotonin. The problem is that sometimes we think that that's all we got to do. No, then you got to go and move, because serotonin goes to your brain when you move, exercise, like literally every day, right? So one thing is doing the supplementation, whether it was psychedelics, 5-HTP, any kind of serotonergic thing is what I tell people, right? Then I got to take it to your brain, because if it gets stuck in your gut, you're going to have diarrhea for 3 weeks, for example, right? So we got to get it to your brain. So I stress a lot exercise. But going back to the scans, I mean, the scans for me are so important to have. Now, I've already almost gotten to the point where I can almost draw people's scan. So depending on the symptoms, I might tell them, we might not need one. But should everyone get? Honestly, they should. They're not that expensive. They're not more expensive than an MRI or a CT. The problem is that our healthcare system will cover for a CT and MRI, even if it's not really giving us that information. But then they won't cover for a SPECT scan, which is giving us function of your brain, not just
Well,
anatomy.
I don't want to go there with our medical system. So we all know why that is. So I, yeah, I just, I think it's so important. I've heard so many success stories. Like, how do you know? Like, what are you looking at when you look at a brain scan? Are you looking at light up like a Christmas tree? Are you looking for more of gray matter? What do you see? What do you look for?
So there's first, when you get the SPECT scan, you get two types of images. You get the surface, and then you get the inside deeper structures. The surface, what you're looking for is if there's bumps and holes and divots. That tells you poor oxygenation, poor activity. Now, me as a psychiatrist, my job is to understand all those parts of your brain and what they're supposed to do. So, for example, frontal lobe. If I see your frontal lobe is like with holes or it has decreased activity, you're going to have ADHD type of symptoms, right? But then the other part of the scan, which is our limbic system, it controls our emotions, that one can light up in different ways. So there's several systems that are lighting up depending on what the person is dealing with. So I particularly focus on the patterns that light up, because certain patterns tell me this person experienced emotional trauma. Another pattern tells me this person experienced trauma that they saw or that they witnessed. It might have been done to them, or they saw it done to someone else, like my patient that I mentioned earlier. So there's certain patterns that light up. Our limbic system is driven a lot by serotonin. So if I see that someone's limbic system is on fire, right, really lit up, working too hard, I need to help it with a serotonergic thing. So that's basically what the scans tell us. And it really just guides, for me as a psychiatrist, my whole treatment plan. From what foods you should be eating, what foods you should be avoiding, what exercises, what type of exercise you should be doing and not doing. And then there's supplementation, there's types of therapies, there's all kinds of tools in my toolbox that then I pull out depending on what your scan is telling me. I mean, a scan for me is like someone's fingerprint. It's very unique to what your brain is doing. Yes, there's patterns that most people, you say someone with anxiety always has this pattern, someone with depression always has this pattern, but we're a lot more complex than just a diagnosis.
Sure. You, so once you give somebody this treatment plan, I assume the success because of with this, I mean, it's almost down to a science what you're trying to heal. So you've really kind of figured out what to give them. And that's pretty amazing. So the question I'm trying to ask here, and I can't really get it right, is with these scans, I guess what I'm trying to say is, could you heal these? Are these healed then? I mean, you can actually heal your brain, correct?
No, you got cut off and I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
Nope. I was going to
Can you
say you
heal?
can actually heal. Yeah, your brain. You can actually heal your brain, correct? I mean, your brain will
Of course.
always create new neural pathways, will it not?
And that's what we've learned now more and more about neuroplasticity. We always thought that you have,
Can I stop you there for a minute about neuroplasticity? Can we explain? I mean, that word
sure,
is thrown around a lot in our space.
a
Explain
lot,
that for
yes.
people. Can you explain what it is?
And and also to say that too, I think it's also misused. Neuroplasticity is basically there's basic concepts around neuroplasticity, but it's the idea where a nerve could be damaged, but the nerves around it can start behaving like it. So even if that nerve was damaged, and a nerve is microscopic, I mean, you can't see that, right? All the nerves around it start behaving like it. So that's one of the concepts of neuroplasticity. So let's look at trauma. And I'm not just talking about emotional. I'm talking about physical trauma, which is usually where we use the word neuroplasticity. Because for many years there was a thought that if the brain got hurt, that's it. That part is dead. It can never get that function again. What we have learned through the years now, researching what is the brain really doing, even if that nerve is dead, the nerves around it start behaving like it. So you can regain that function. So, for example, a lot of patients that I have physical brain injuries that no one knew that they had them because they never got scanned, right? And when we think of brain injury, we think of a major one, right? Being in a coma. No, there is small injuries you can have to your brain that can still cause functionality problems. So, one very common one is our temporal lobes. Because of where they're at inside the skull, they're more likely than any other parts of our brain to get damaged. Well, the temporal lobes control memory. The temporal lobes control mood and emotional regulation. So people who can get angry easily or just pissed off easily, that's usually left temporal lobe injury. So when we scan them and I see that their temporal lobe is damaged, well, now I have to start changing that and change everything about that person's life, really, from diet to even types of jobs that they should be doing and activities they should be doing to bring back that function to the nearby cells of the left temporal lobe to regain those functions. Does that kind of make sense? Maybe it's too much.
Absolutely. Is diet the is diet the biggest thing that we could start with to help us change? Or is
Diet,
that a broad
believe
question?
it or not, I wouldn't say the biggest thing. I think it's a very important thing. For me, if you ask any of my patients, they're like, well, he's going to say everything. I'm going to tell them, like, you got to do all of it, right? But diet is a big pillar. The problem that we have with diet is if we've had bad diet since we were 2 years old, and now we're in our 50s and 60s, it's really difficult to change that person's habits because those are just now habits, right? So for me, when I tell them, okay, this is my whole plan, I leave nutrition in the bottom as like step 6 because I'm not going to freak them out yet. Because when I tell them they have to start drinking alcohol, they have to stop eating so much sugar, they're going to be like, no way, I'm not doing this. Time out. I'm not doing any of that. Right. So a lot of people really, I get a lot of hesitation from that change. But I have to tell them, listen, if you want to improve your temporal lobes, to lower your risk of dementia, for example, we have to change your diet, Mediterranean and keto. Your brain needs healthy fats.
Move to
Now, a lot of
Costa
my
Rica,
Hispanic
right?
patients, yeah, my Hispanic patients tell me like fat, yes. I'm like, no, 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 not animal fat, plant-based fat, avocados. And in Costa Rica, I mean, Costa Rica is one of the healthiest people I think in the whole world. They talked about it, right? But if you look at their diet, it's a lot of plant and fruit base. We don't, not all of us eat that way. Even other Hispanic countries don't eat that way, right? So I tell them, listen, if we want to improve that temporal lobe that is damaged physically, we need to now increase, for example, your fat intake. I need to be checking your omega-3 profile periodically to make sure that you are eating the amount of fat that your brain needs. So that's an example of how important diet is. But I still leave it as one of my last steps because most people are just very, very resistant to make that change.
Yeah. You know, I think alcohol is the biggest change. I think alcohol is the United States' biggest lie of happiness. It's just It's such an unhealthy drug. It's just such an unhealthy habit. I mean, I don't say that because I don't drink anymore. I say that because I've seen it with my own eyes. It's the devil in disguise. And if there's anything that will bring on more unhealthy habits to you, it's alcohol. So that's a start for anybody. It's a believer in me.
And it's one of the things I tell patients, it's a depressant. So if we're struggling with symptoms of depression, we got to remove that thing. I can give you all the antidepressants of the world, but we have this thing that is like pulling you down heavy from one of your legs, and it's called alcohol. I got to get rid of
Absolutely.
it. You know,
Yeah.
it's a bad sugar too. I mean, it's pure sugar. So if you also think about it from a nutritional standpoint, it's not nutritional. It's just sugar, you know? So it's some of those, I always tell patients, whatever we put in our mouth is one of the things that I started working on later because they really don't want to change it. Um, but it tells me a lot about what that brain needs. So take alcohol, for example. I tell them you must have an anxious brain because what does alcohol also do? It increases GABA, and GABA is a neurotransmitter that just calms things down. So if I have someone who's struggling with alcohol, that's a very anxious brain. So I got to get rid of the anxiety so then the alcohol honestly just comes off because I don't need that medication anymore. A lot of people who are struggling with substances, they're self-medicating depending on what that substance is doing to their brain. So what I try to do is, can we replace that with something else? But I got to treat the cause, and the cause is trauma, anxiety, and now you're self-medicating with alcohol because you want that GABA.
Crazy. I like how you treat, that's how we have to do it. We have to treat. And speaking of treating, there's a place you have called the White Butterfly Healing Society. Great name, great name. So, what's the story behind that name and the community you're building around it? Because we love community building. We think that's the up and coming thing.
Well, we're social creatures. We need community. We need to feel part of. So the white butterfly actually comes from, I was at the Louvre many years ago, and I really fell in love with this statue in the corner of one of the rooms. And I'm a big Greek mythology nerd. So it was Cupid kissing a girl, and I never had seen that. Usually see pictures of Cupid with other gods or just by himself, right? So I didn't understand it. So that's Cupid's kiss. That's what it's known for, and he's kissing Psyche. Psyche was a princess, and he was in love with her. So the idea of Psyche and love, which is Cupid, made me like kind of go in and learn more about it. And the word Psyche means soul. She's also known as a white butterfly. And you can see my screen, but my desktop is actually her face of the statue of Psyche. So she's known as the white butterfly. Psyche means soul. Psychiatry is the medical treatment of the soul. So for me, when I came across that statue, which I don't think it happened, whatever, I think I was really called to go see that statue. I was like, this is the name of my practice. I mean, this is literally what merges everything that I've studied and I'm passionate about. And the healing society is because we're those outcasts that we're working on our healing. And we all want to be part of a group. And I think it it heals a lot of wounds too from being outcasted. But is that feeling of outcast marginalized that kind of drive us together? And a lot of the people that I work with, that's what I'm always preaching. That's what I'm always telling them about. I don't believe anybody being broken and being thrown away. I don't think we throw away people. I think that's very bad. And our society, unfortunately, since a very young age, teaches us to throw away people because they're broken, because something happened to them, or they're weird, or they're stupid, or they're not cool enough, right? We've always kind of been taught that way. I think there's been a shift a little bit in the last few years with social media, where a lot of outcasts are speaking up about these things. So I think it's fascinating to see that change. So that's why we created the White Butterfly Healing Society, and we're working on it. We're adding a lot of our love and soul to everything that we do, and because we do it also with purpose, not just because it came out of my what. Like, we study what we're
You
doing, we're putting it
you
into
have
practice, and get people
yeah,
there.
you have to do for anything to work, you have to really have a purpose and you have to be on a mission. And you have to really believe, because if you don't, it's a waste of time. So some people out there listening to you right now, like they think they're too much or they're not enough. What would you want them to hear most from? What would you want them to hear most from you right now?
I would say if you're having those thoughts, don't listen to those. Those are just thoughts that you have been taught that you are too much or that you're too difficult or too complicated. So stop listening to those thoughts. Easier said than done. Totally understand that. But that's what we have to start coming in and working on that. Because that belief system about yourself needs to completely change. If I like the too much, I mean, look at my shirt. And I think when we stop paying so much attention to that label that someone gave us, or that we might have given ourselves, right? That I'm being rejected because I'm too much, or these people don't like me, or my family has this view of me. We need to shift that brain, that framework, right? Because it goes down to your core of who you are if you believe those things to be true. And just like, you believe them to be true, you're going to be behaving that way. So it's changing your focus and getting that frontal lobe to focus on valuing those qualities.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we started this call and I was really didn't know where it was all going to go, but because we really are truly about psychedelics and psychedelic healing and, finding that purpose there and speaking the truth and talking about something that's been used for thousands and thousands of years by so many people, so many, and that we've just demonized them in the last 50 because they work. And you know what you do works, and it's like, maybe psychedelics work as a catalyst and they work somewhere a little bit quicker, but we're all going to the same spot. We all want to heal this fucked up trauma that's what we've been living with for the last 30, 40, 50 years. And it is so easy to go down. It's not so easy. It's pretty difficult work, but it's once you understand it, the ease of it to just find it where it is, understand it, respect it, love it, heal it, and it goes away. And I just like how this conversation really came together today. And I think our guests will really like how it came together today. So before we go, why don't you shout out some of your handles, your companies, whatever we're going to put out there for you? Because we do have a big following.
Well, I mean, like we mentioned, the white butterfly clinic.com is our website. It's our website. We started publishing this year the White Butterfly Journal, which we focus every issue on one of these qualities like integrity, curiosity, humor, discipline. Every single issue, those are our core values. And the reason why I focus a lot on those is because I think our mental health care space needs to change to be so focused on symptom treatment and really should focus on building someone's soul and person. So I that's all free. It's on our website. And we also have the Power Up series, which is a workbook version, very short, because most of my ADHD patients will not be able to sit through any long reading or book. But that one is to put a lot of those things into practice, right? So when we talk about curiosity, I try to push them to think outside the box, and I have little questions and exercises for them to do. And that's all on there on our website. We see patients too, but it really depends on someone's need and how we're able to connect them with people in the community. I'm a big believer of, you know, I might not be for you, but I'll find someone that will be for you. Does that make sense? So I'm a big believer into making connections with other providers. And I tell patients, when they come and call the office, and they might say, "Hey, I want to see you, but you're out of the state where I see you, or even in another country." I mean, I work with people from other countries too, as a more of a consultant with the team over there. But I always tell them, if I'm not the right person for you, my team will work really hard to find you the person that is for you, because I do believe that not everyone is for everyone, right? And every person is individual and unique. And then on social media, I mean, I think our Instagram is the most used, even by me personally, and it's Dr. _Hector. And you can find me there, doing more interviews and and more resources for patients, and especially our Hispanic patients who don't have a lot of information out there. I try to do some things in Spanish. I'll get messages from my English speakers of like, can you do that one in English? Because I didn't know anything you said. So we're always trying to educate, because I think that's what I've really been called to do. The word doctor means teacher. I love to teach. I used to be a high school teacher. And for me, making sure you understand what your brain is doing, fall in love with your brain. You only got one, and there's no transplant, right? So you got to take care of it and love it more than probably any other organ that you have, because all the other ones
That
could be
would be
transplanted.
crazy. A brain transplant. Somebody else is standing in my body.
No, that would be weird.
But Dr. Hector, I'm going to tell you, you're a really cool dude. I love your shirt too. Yeah, let's be loud. I love it. So you're a really cool guy. Thank you very much for a really good podcast. I think very much people will find this very informative. So thank you so much. And you have a great
Thank
day,
you
my
so much
friend.
for having me.
No
You too.
problem. Ciao.